This is really about being free to create what you want your life to look like. We each are our own hero. And how do we take the challenges that come our way and see those as the birth process of us becoming heroic? Can you meet that judgment that ultimately will surface with neutrality?
This is the Wall Street Coach Podcast with Kim Ann Curtin.
Welcome back to the Wall Street Coach Podcast with your host, Kim Ann Curtin and Lucas Peterson, hosts. And we're here today to talk, this is what, episode 9? I think it's episode 9 of all the, podcasts that I've done for the Wall Street Coach. And because right now we're recording on the day before Thanksgiving, we're going to focus on receiving. We're going to focus on gratitude and joy and just talk about how some of those are easier said than done and just give you guys some kind of tips and tricks on why these are so powerful. I think a lot of people can kind of, trivialize them or make them seem like they're just so soft and not important. And hopefully you'll see at the end of this conversation that they're pretty powerful tools. So yeah, how are you, Lucas?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. Okay. Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing good. Had a whole morning of steady trade, so I feel like I'm all warmed up for sure.
Yeah, good.
For sure. Yeah.
I'm in my childhood bedroom, so I'm at my parents' house for
awesome. That's awesome. That's a perfect place.
And like I was telling you before, there used to not be a plant here. There was just like, I don't know, motocross posters and.
Let's see the magazine. Let's share the magazine with everybody because that's.
So I found this old Racer X magazine from like 2000. I don't know, 8 maybe
that's
2005. Awesome. Oh yeah, April of 2005. Racer X when I used to race dirt bikes. So.
That's awesome. We were talking a little bit before we filmed this about how old he was when he was racing those motorbikes. So, and you were how old?
I was like 13 to 19 were when I was racing.
And how many?
I was never that good, but
I'm sure you were good. If you stayed on the bike, you were good. How many bones did you break? Oh. You should have jumped off.
That's the problem. Yeah, I broke more bones than I won races. So
gosh. That's the hint that maybe the racer has to. But I'm kind of jealous of you. I would have. Were there any girls doing it back then?
There were a few. Yeah, I had friends
that
were women that are girls, I guess, at that age that raced.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Some of them were really good. So
really, okay, that's cool. Yeah. I think that would have been a fun thing. I think I always wanted to ride a motorcycle when I was little, and I always wanted to play drums, which I kind of got the feeling like girls weren't allowed to do those two things. So I still have a little, secret desire to have a girl's motorcycle one day, or get a drum set. And that girl, have you seen that little girl? What's her name? That like 10-year-old girl who's like a drumming genius.
Oh, the drummer, yeah.
She's so good. Oh my gosh, I've loved watching her. And she's talking to Dave Grohl, right? Is it Grohl? Yeah. And he's like encouraging her. I'm just like, oh, that girl, she must be beside herself. That is the coolest thing. Yeah. Very jealous of her. All right, so we're going to talk about, especially because it's the day before Thanksgiving, just about the importance and kind of some of the data on gratitude. And I know for myself, I have to say, I'm not sure where or who it was that taught me about gratitude early in my life, but I did learn that lesson pretty early. It could have been because there was a bit of a challenging childhood for me. And I think I probably, in the midst of that, really did try to focus on the positives so I could just kind of get through it. And so perhaps that practice developed early in me. But I have been amazed when things are challenging or when I'm having a rough week that I do have a tendency to stop and spend some time on a gratitude list. And just, sometimes it's just little bullet points in a booklet of like 10, 20, 30, 50 things. And I can see that my mood shifts after that. And I know there's some data that you found for me about this concept of gratitude. Was it a Berkeley study on gratitude?
Yeah, Berkeley did a study on gratitude where they had 3 different groups of participants who all received like counseling, but then one group was instructed to write a letter of gratitude to another person each week for 3 weeks. The second group was asked to write like their deepest thoughts and feelings about negative experiences. Mm-hmm. And then the third group didn't write anything. Yeah. And what they found was the people who wrote the letters of gratitude to other people, even if they didn't give them to the other people, just they used like what they called first person plural words like we and around positive thoughts. And then they found 4 to 12 weeks later, all these people in the group that wrote the gratitude letters reported having better mental health than when they started the study. And the others found that they were the same. They were stagnant. So
wow, that's awesome. And if I remember correctly, this was a group of participants that were reporting some forms of depression and sadness, and they were just struggling and asking for mental health counseling, right?
Yeah. All of them were. So.
And that, I think that just that idea of like, even if you're not giving the letter to somebody, but you're spending the time and flexing the brain muscles to remember all the benefits that have happened to you or all the good things that have happened. I do think it takes you, I find it takes me quickly into another kind of dimension, another kind of paradigm. Do you find that yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I try to practice some form of gratitude every day. It's usually in the mornings and in the evenings. I have like a morning routine where I stretch and do some like, but one of it's kind of like a little meditation at the end of it where I just try to like think of 3 things. I don't even write them down anymore, but I used to. And it's just like 3 things that I'm grateful for. And sometimes I feel like when we're in our most like frantic moods, that really helps slow me down, where it's like where I feel like I have a lot to do. And if I just think about the 3 just simple things that, they're not big things that have happened in my life recently. They can just be,
extra whipped cream on a Starbucks coffee. No, I'm just kidding.
It can be that. It can be, that I, that we have this podcast to record, something like simple like that. Just and How about you? Do you, what kind of gratitude do you practice?
I do have a tendency to reach out to people and kind of just let them know that they really matter to me. Sometimes it'll be a text. Sometimes it's a call. Sometimes it's just checking in with someone. I tried to do that. Like, I remember years ago hearing about, I think it was Thankful Tuesday or Thankful Thursday. I can't remember what the guy called it, but he would reach out. He was a famous, where did I read this? He was a famous producer in Hollywood, and he would go and call all the A-listers who had slipped to B-listing, like maybe their last movie didn't do so well. And so they were, he felt like these are people that are going to be back at the A-list, but they were not the A-list now. Probably nobody was giving them any love. They didn't feel anybody cared about them anymore. He would call them when they were in that B-list phase. And he would just let them know he was thinking about them, checking in on them. Don't worry, it'll pick back up, because he felt like he wanted to obviously be a contribution, but also because he was a smart enough producer to realize that in a year or 2, when they're back on top, if I'm the nice guy they remember from the dark, lean years, then maybe I'll get them to agree to my movies in the future. And so, yes, he had a little bit of an ulterior motive, but I thought, wow, that is just so genius. And also because he felt like those were people he wouldn't have talked to, he hadn't spoke to in so long, that it was time. It was like he'd have some sort of a tickler file of the people he hadn't talked to in a while, and he just made that extra effort. So that when I think I learned that about 10 or 15 years ago, and I was like, that is so genius. So that's what I'll do even with clients. Like maybe I haven't heard from clients for a really long time, or it's been a while since they completed their sessions or their company sessions, and then I'll revisit them. How you doing? What's going on? Like I genuinely want to know, but I think it's it's just a brilliant way to kind of reconnect. And usually, say something grateful. Sometimes they've made an introduction to a new client or new prospect. So I'll be like, hey, thanks so much. And I remember that you did, and that was amazing. I think I find I'm nourished when I do that. When I acknowledge somebody else, I walk away feeling better inside my own self. So yeah, to me, it seems like a no-brainer.
Well, it makes me think of like, if this happens, every once in a while, but you get like a text out of the blue or an email out of the blue from somebody you haven't heard from or thought of in a while. And they're just like, hey, how are you? Or, hey, I was thinking about that time we did this and that was fun.
That's right.
Or something like that. And just that, I think that I always feel, a sense of completeness and happiness when I hear that from people. And so
for sure,
there's no reason not to be that person giving it as well.
Yeah. Agreed. And I think if one makes it a habit or a practice, then it just begins to bake into your day-to-day or bake into your life. And it also, I believe it facilitates you realizing how good you've got it, right? Because everybody's got something. And the more you focus on what you do have, as opposed to what you don't have, it can just shift your vision. There's a practice that I love called appreciative inquiry. And it's something, God, I think it's been around probably for 20 years, possibly more, but it's a methodology of going into an organization. And they call it AI, but this was before artificial intelligence. You can't call it AI anymore. But you go into an organization as a coach or a consultant, and you look at what works. You don't even talk about what doesn't work. You just look at what works, and you turn the volume up on that. And what they found over years of studying this technique is that the bad behaviors, the bad things that are not ideal, have a tendency to dissipate on their own, because that which is working just gets turned up so much in volume that it becomes a momentum that catches everything and kind of discharges those things. And I thought that was just fascinating when I first started coaching. I thought, God, talk about focusing on what you want instead of what you don't want, just changes the whole game.
It's interesting too. That makes me think of like within trading. That's something that I had to do early on, because sometimes you want to like emulate what other successful traders have done and try to do what they've done. But I found that there were certain strategies that I would try that just didn't work for me. And so rather than trying to like figure out why they're not working, it was like, why don't I just do the things that are working? Like,
totally.
And just until they like, don't mess with perfection. If it's
Correct.
Working, why am I trying to go this other route? So
totally. And I think the brain is wired to go that other route because the brain wants to know, the brain wants to know why. And it's also sometimes curious, but it's a really good question. And I think also we're preparing ourselves, our ability to have survived, the survival of the fittest experience, our ability to survive is because we have a tendency to catastrophize. We know how to look out behind that rock, make sure nothing's there, but to a fault. So we have to keep it a little bit in check, and when I say survival of the fittest, I think I just want to put a shout out to this book that I love so much, which is actually, the title, it's by Joye, is Joye. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but he wrote a book called Darwin's Lost Theory of Love. And I got this book given to me right after I had finished writing my book, because, I take on in my book, Transforming Wall Street, that Adam Smith was actually an advocate for for taking care of the community. Everybody speaks to him as the father of capitalism, but he actually was a moral philosopher, and he was a huge advocate that with any kind of success in a country, any sort of success that you could kind of measure, you had a moral obligation to the community, for those less fortunate, for those who had, challenges. And after I, was talking about this a lot when I finished writing the book, a person said to me, hey, did you ever hear that Darwin and his theory of, survival of the fittest, that he believed ultimately the reason we had survived was not just our ability to look behind rocks, but because because we have empathy for one another, for fellow human beings. And my understanding from when I'm reading this book and from doing some research on Darwin, that never gets covered. Nobody talks about that. And that's why that man's book is so profound, because they basically, he uses the word love. I don't even know how many countless times in his, edict or his white paper, back in the day, they didn't call it white paper, but that's what it really was. And the powers that be at the time, just kind of erased that concept because it just didn't fit in with their political agenda at the time. But I just thought, geez, these two men who informed so much of the way we operate, right? Adam Smith and Charles Darwin, they both were talking about love and being a contribution to other people, and yet we never hear that. So,
well, I think if it makes me think of when our society was much smaller. We didn't live in these massive cities, but you had to reciprocate and help out with the community when it's groups of less than 200 people, or else you were going to lose your group, and that's
correct.
Not a benefit to anyone. It's that was another study that I looked at in preparation for this podcast, was this Berkeley study about why giving is good for you. And one of the points that they make in that is that it promotes cooperation and social connection.
Yes.
And you probably heard about this a couple of years ago. There was this, it happened at like a Starbucks where somebody just bought drinks for the person behind them. And it was like this pay it forward movement that kind of started for a day. And they had over 100 cars that just bought the coffee for the person behind them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is
Did you hear about that?
I didn't hear about that.
Oh, really?
I believe it.
Yeah.
But it's because I think it is contagious. Isn't that what I think one of the studies said, that it is contagious. Giving is contagious. Giving makes us feel happy. Giving is good for our health. It promotes cooperation, social connection, evokes gratitude, and is contagious. And I have found that when I have done that, I've done that for people in a Starbucks where I paid for the person behind me, that person, their level of joy when they realize that, sometimes you're halfway out the door, but if you're there, it's the level of enthusiasm is not in proportion to if somebody handed you $6 for your drink. It's next level enthusiasm. Yeah. And that's because you feel seen, I feel, and because it's so unexpected. But I'm not surprised that took off, and because of that one person starting it. If you've never done it, the other thing that I love to do, especially this time of year, is go to Kmart. I don't think there's Kmart anymore, but I'll go to Walmart or Target, and I'll ask what layaways, have toys and kids stuff, and then pay the layaway down to $1. So that the person, it stays in layaway up to $1 or something like that. But I'll tell you, when I've gone and done that, not only am I crying by the time I finish doing that, but the woman at the register is crying. She's usually called the manager. They start crying. And then it just starts this ripple effect of what is she doing? She paid for somebody else's layaway? I want to do that. I want to pay for somebody's layaway. And then all of a sudden it just dominoes. But it is the best hit of joy you could ever get. If you're feeling sorry for yourself, if you're not around your family, you just go to a Kmart or Target or what is it called? Walmart layaway.
Yeah.
And boy, it's better than getting drunk. It really is.
Wow. That's fascinating.
It's really, really fun. Really fun.
I bet. Speaking of getting drunk, it made me think of it's a different thing than going to a bar and just buying somebody a drink. That's a very different type of
yes, it is.
Reciprocation.
It's totally different. And just, your own speculation of, if somebody's got a layaway for $300 at, a Target. I can remember my mom putting stuff on layaway and hoping she could make the payments, because if she didn't make the payment 1 week, the stuff would be put back, and then she'd get the money back. But I remember just, her trying to save some pennies to get that layaway payment done. So it's hard not to speculate now of how exciting it was when a layaway would come through when she could afford to get it. I just think, oh God, for, a parent who's struggling to make ends meet can't afford to get their kids their toys for Christmas, or they're young enough to believe in Santa. Like, that person's going to be freaking having their day made when they get that call that their layaway's been paid for, with the exception of $1. It's like, how is that not like keep you floating for like a week or two,
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm sure to some degree, they, that part of it being contagious, they pass that on to someone else in their life.
I would agree. Because I think that doing that for somebody is meeting their needs. And when you meet somebody's needs, you facilitate the feelings, the emotions of, joy, equanimity, peace of mind, relief. Like, there's a whole bunch of feelings that come when needs are met. And then you have oxygen and you're in a position to potentially meet the needs of other people. But, and that's why I feel it's contagious. The contagion is meeting people's needs. And when you meet people's needs, they experience a whole bunch of feelings.
Yeah. It probably also, I feel like when you're in a situation like that, I mean, for most of us, we're in this situation of scarcity, especially with money most of the time.
Yeah.
Even if you have enough money, we're in the top, 1% of the world that as far as wealth is concerned, but I still feel like that I'm constantly trying to get more money, because that's just the nature of our society and the nature of the way we live. So I think that when you do that, when you're able to give them that and that graciousness, they're probably that some of that scarcity is taken away. And I'll bet that helps that, like you're saying, the needs are met there.
Yeah, for sure. And I for both parties, we're always focused on what we don't have enough of. But when we start to shift our focus to what do we have, what is enough, and how can that not spread, especially if you're gifting somebody something like that they really do want. There's so much grace in this world, and I feel like we have a tendency to focus automatically on the things that don't go the way we want them to, and where grace doesn't exist. The news happens to put in front of us all the time the horrible things that happen. That's why I love that channel, the Good News Network, where they show you these little tiny things. There was one that was so cute the other day. That was a UPS driver who noticed that the pillows on the couch outside the front door on the patio were like misaligned, and he took the time to like put them all in order. It was such a simple gesture, but it came from such a beautiful place of like the guys just making their porch look a little neater. And I feel like we all need to see that so that we begin to realize there's so much grace that's being laid down in front of us, but are we open to it? Are we seeing it? It's there, but are we, there's a great saying that says, how does it go? It's something like, it's always available to us, but we are not always available to it.
Yeah.
So I think that,
Yeah. I think this is another thing that gratitude helps you see, like practicing gratitude is when you're practicing gratitude, you're able to see those smaller things, and especially, in your life, but also in others, and be like, wow, that's, just to see somebody like fix the pillows. Like that's not always something that you'd be like, what's wrong with that person? But if you are practicing gratitude, I think you're like, wow, good for them. Like Agreed. That's such a kind thing. And
Agreed. We just read a book in my book club, and there's this one I only got halfway through it, and there's this one character who's kind of annoying and he's kind of frustrating, and he I think the reader is annoyed by this character. And I just found out that by the end of the book, this is the guy that like does this super solid favor for one of the main characters. And you're just like, who would have expected that annoying guy to be the one who comes through and creates this opportunity, this miracle, if you will, right? And yet I think this is what happens with one another. We have a tendency to put somebody in a box or a situation, and we say, this is horrible, this is terrible, look at all these awful things that are going to come. And yet we don't realize that there could be a whole bunch of things that are happening behind the scenes that we'll never be privy to, that we don't know if there is something there that actually changes or shifts the end result, which is part of why I like Byron Katie's work, Loving What Is her book. She calls her practice the work. And what she's saying is like, how do you learn how to love what is? Not the way you want it to be, not the way you hoped it should be or think it should be, but what actually is. And that practicing that kind of gratitude is like next level. That's next level gratitude. And I'm able to do it sometimes, but not all the time. So,
that's like the age old, like the grass is always greener on the other side, right? It's always, I feel like we all have this in various versions of our lives, but it's like you see somebody, a friend or a colleague, or even somebody you don't know, especially with like social media. And it's like, I need to be there like them, but we're all on our own journey and we all have so many things that other people are probably envious of us for to a degree. And, sometimes we're not able to recognize all that we have. And that's
agreed.
Yeah.
And it's sad because it's like, what a waste, it's like, it's a waste if we're not really present to just what we do have and what we've already been given, if you will. And that it's like, and I feel even Hawaii, living here, it changed me because the beauty is so palpable that just driving, 10 minutes to my office, I am like so gobsmacked by how gorgeous the road is, but the sun coming up behind the mountains, like I'm just forced, like nature here forces you almost at gunpoint, terrible metaphor, to be present to it.
Be present. Yeah.
You can't not be like you, and I asked this wonderful friend of mine, Phyllis Fox, who is 89 this year, I think. And she has lived in Hawaii for many, many years, 30 plus years. And I said to her at one point, a year after being here, do you ever get used to it, Phyllis? The beauty, like, do you ever get used to it? And I was terrified to hear her answer. And she paused and she said, not once, not one day, not one moment, not at all. And I was like, thank God, because if I ever got used to this, somebody's got to come and slap me across the face and wake me up. Like it is just, and that this living here has forced me to really start to be much more present to all that is right here in front of me and how grateful I am to be here. So find it where you do. Look, I'm lucky I live in Hawaii, right? But there's plenty of places, there's plenty of people, there's plenty of houses, there's plenty of offices, there's plenty of, men who sell newspapers who are probably loving on you. And are you letting it in?
Yeah.
Like letting it in. And could you let it in maybe a little bit more?
Yeah. I think that's a good point as well, is just the little things, like, the little interactions that you have, yes. I think we all have less now because of like the coronavirus lockdowns and stuff.
Yes.
But I remember, when you go to a coffee shop and just having, like, being present with the person taking your order and just being present for the 30 seconds can like really shift you and also them.
Absolutely.
Just to like have a conversation instead of just being like, a small black or whatever that you like.
Zombie-like.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and actually ask.
And actually mean it and wait for the answer. Because honestly, there are times when I've done that where that clerk doesn't even know I mean it. And so they give me some stock answer. And on occasion, I will say, no, I really want to know, like, are you okay? And they're like, oh, are you talking to me? Like they get all confused. And it takes them a second to like, oh, it's kind of a long day. And I'll be like, I'm so sorry to hear that. What time do you get off? And it's like 2 hours. I'm like, you can make 2 hours. Like, but we've just both gotten enriched a little bit in that moment. And I think especially because of the pandemic, it's more important now than usual to do that as much as you can, because people are starved for the connection. We don't get the connection other than through Zoom or with those people in our small little pod, so to speak. So more than ever, it's really critical to do that. And even with the masks, like you're not able to even really fully, right? So it's like really important to look each other in the eye now more than ever.
Yeah. Cause there's some sort of, I forget what it was. It was some sort of research that I read about a while back, where smiles, like seeing people smiling, shifts. They did like MRIs of people's brains and watching people smile, and it like lights up dopamine in our brains to see other people smile. So yeah, with having the mask on, it's a different,
it's a different experience. Yeah. It is. But this guy's name, I hope it'll come back to me. He's the one. Lie to Me was a TV show on many years ago that talked about microfacial expressions. And the man who that was inspired by, we'll have to put it in the footnotes because I can't think of his name. At least it's Paul Ellis, maybe. I don't know. That's the name that's coming to me. I don't know if that's right. But anyway, he had a micro expression course that I took probably 15 years ago, where you get literally a half of a second image of a person who is showing a microaggression or joy or certain facial cues about whether they're lying, whether they're telling the truth, whether they're happy. And I remember learning in his course, what I learned in his course was that the eyes actually tell you if somebody's authentically smiling. So I have smiled at people during this pandemic with a mask over my face, and I feel like people are smiling back. Like I know, because they're seeing my eyes get crinkled if I'm genuinely smiling, that I can notice when their face changes just by looking at their eyes. And I didn't really remember this until I did, when I was like, oh my God, it's the micro expression of joy or happiness that I'm seeing reflected in the eye. So I wonder if that study, that you're talking about, seeing people smile, what that would be like. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they should do it now with masks on and see if I'll bet you're right. I'll bet we can see it, because you can see it. I mean, that's our eyes are where everything is. So
correct. Yeah. So you should look for it, and those who are listening to us, you guys should look for it too. If you have your mask on and you smile at someone and see if looks like they're smiling back, I promise you their eyes will have a certain kind of for sure. Yeah, for sure.
You'll know. I don't know what it is. I wouldn't know how to describe it, but that crease,
and you can take photographs when, politicians are smiling, or actors, or when you can take that person, and if you cover over their smile and you just look at their eyes, you can see the ones who really mean the smile and who don't. Because you can, I can do a fake smile right now. It just doesn't, it doesn't read the same way, right? Yeah. But a real smile, like everything shifts. It's all on these micro expressions. I can't recommend that course enough. If you've never watched that series, I don't know if it's still out there, Lied to Me. It was a fascinating series. I really enjoyed it. But the course, I recommend the course to a lot of people, especially people who have to do sales and everything. You can instantly tell if a room is listening to you. Usually you can feel it, but these micro expressions, wow, it was fascinating. I remember doing the test in the beginning, and then you slowly get to see the picture slow down so you can take in what's going on for somebody. But anyway, it's a pretty cool practice. I think there's some disagreement about how scientifically accurate it is, but I think the man who created that, he's probably one of a kind who can spot it, and I think it's pretty fun to do on your own, just looking on pictures on Twitter and that kind of stuff to see, oh yeah, she does not look like she's really happy to be there.
Yeah. Well, this kind of ties into another thing we're going to talk about today around joy and happiness, and how we receive joy or, in ourselves and feel joy, and whether we welcome happiness to actually be felt within ourselves. Yeah. Something that was really eye-opening for me was when I read Taming Your Gremlin. Yeah. In that, and it's he talks about being open to emotions, and how much resistance we have to emotions as opposed to experiencing them. Yeah. And he was even joy, you may have a resistance to joy and not recognize it. And I think, I mean, this is all anecdotal in my life, but I think that a lot of us have that. I think there's some sort of guilt around feeling joy or happiness.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right.
What do you?
I think joy is for people who have had any sort of challenge in their life, and just because of the nature of our world, I feel like joy feels frivolous to some people, and or leaves them vulnerable and leaves them wide open to be attacked. Like if you don't have yourself braced for the other shoe that's going to drop, then you potentially are going to get hurt. So can I afford joy? Can I really sit here and just be in joy and be in, a state of elation without having potentially somebody who's going to unexpectedly come around the corner and steal it from me? So I feel that's a big part of it. It's just potentially a place of, and it could be that some people in their childhood were not encouraged to have joy, and or religion or spiritual practices. It could be that joy was seen as something that the family couldn't afford, emotionally, spiritually, or financially. And I think there has been a cultural indoctrination that to be serious or to be studious is more favored and more encouraged or rewarded by the society we're in, at least, than it is to just be somebody who's happy-go-lucky. Like somebody happy-go-lucky, like, well, who do they think they are? That they get to kick back and just be relaxed. And aren't you worried about the state of the world? Aren't you worried about, XYZ, fill in the blank? It's like, well, do we not get to feel joy? Do we have to earn joy? Like, does it have to be earned? So it's like, no, you get to just have it. But I do think there is some kind of discrimination around people who are joyful and who are happy, or that they're dumb. Like I happen to be a girl who pretty much has been happy my whole life. And I've definitely gotten that, not just because of being a blonde, but, dumb blondes, or that people that are joyful or that are happy all the time. Like, what's wrong with them? What's their problem? Like, I think there's a little bit of that. Like if they were really smart, they would not be so happy. Like as if smart and joy don't go together.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think there's definitely something to that. I also, I think like having an experience in like throughout the university experience, I remember learning, like the more you learn, I learned this in like a philosophy class, but people the more people learn, the less happy they are, or something like that. So then it was like almost like that you should be unhappy because that makes you smart. Like that makes you have an IQ or something like that.
That's right. Totally. I've heard that stat too, that the more you learn, the less happy you become. And that is sobering for the people of the world, such as you and me, who like to read a lot, who like to learn everything, because it's like, well, what is this in service to? And one of my spiritual teachers, he cautions me all the time because he knows I like to read so much and always take in lots of information. And, at some point he's just like, when is it enough, Kim? And I'm just like, that's a really good question. When is it enough? And I'm like, I don't know, but I have to have that question be present to it. Like, when is it enough? When is it enough? When do we know enough? When do we give ourselves permission to have joy and or not feel this sense of it has to be earned, that we are not doing something wrong or bad if we let ourselves have it for no good reason, especially on the days when there's no good reason, especially on the days when things are, globally horrific. Like if you can't have joy in the middle of those moments, hell, what the heck? What's the point of it all? It's crazy.
I think that's where like practicing gratitude comes in for me. It's finding those little things, it can just be like thankful for a tree or something, just great, because it can help shift your perspective. And I think shifting our perspective, at least for me, that helps a lot. It's just like once you see all these problems and you're aware of, the more you learn and you feel, or if you do have that sense of like, I've not achieved enough to feel joy or happiness. It's like, where do you set that bar? And
that's right. Or have enough to have joy. Like I don't have enough to have joy, or I don't have X enough, or this or that. Like it's like, as if that's going to give it to you. But we all know it doesn't. It doesn't. It's short-lived. If you're saying that your joy is dependent on that boy calling you or that job or that raise, then your joy is always kind of it's always hostage to the circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Have
you seen this with clients? And if so, how do you, what's the work there?
The work is like doing those gratitude lists at either at the end of the day or the start of the day. But I'll tell you, almost everybody resists it. And then once they don't resist it and they do it a week or two into it, they're like, holy shit, this is amazing. And I'm just like, yeah. but there's so much resistance doing because they feel like it's just so, what's the word? Pedestrian or parochial? Like they're just like, what could that do for me? How much could that do for me? And I'm just like, I'm telling you, you'll be surprised. And if they do it, they will be like, oh my God, I cannot believe the shift that's given me. So, listen to what I say is the moral of that story, because I know from which I talk.
Trust the process.
Trust the process. Always, all of coach training, they always said to us, the coaching happens in between the sessions.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not the conversations. It's what do you take when you leave the coaching session into your day-to-day in between. That is where the rubber meets the road. And this is why it's not for everybody, because it's hard work. People want to come in, they want the pill. Like, who could blame them? Give me the pill. Mm-hmm. What's the pill? Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. But then I give these tools and they don't do them. And they get the Gremlin book and they don't do the exercises. And I'm just like, oh.
Yeah, I was having a really long conversation with a friend that basically turned into a coaching session about a relationship that he was having recently. Yeah. And he was like, just tell me what to do. And I was like, that is not my job. I can't tell you what to do. This is a communication issue. Totally. And if you want to continue to have the communication like that, keep doing what you're doing. But if you don't, you got to do this really hard part right now.
Exactly. And I think even the concept of people wanting people to tell them what to do, at the end of the day, ultimately, you're going to have to take ownership over what that challenge is. And you're going to have to be with the hard to be with parts of whatever's going on. And that's the part that is hard. And that's why we need encouragement and people around us who can help us get over that finish line. Because it's hard to be at the front lines of emotions or people or challenge or confrontation or difficult conversations in ourselves, never mind with other people. So it's tricky. It's very tricky. And the other thing too, I think we were going to talk about is just receiving. And there was something too in the giving that I love that tied into the receiving, but just, I just can't help but notice that for me personally, when I learned how to receive, which was probably 10 years ago, and I'm still learning, one of the guys that I dated for a while, he said he belonged to the NRA club when we first met. And I was like, what? And he was like, never refuse anything. I was like, okay, that's a club I could join. So he was like, yeah, like, it doesn't matter what's offered to me. Like, I think he hated bananas. And I was with him when somebody gave him a banana and he took it graciously. He was like, hey man, thanks. And I was like, but you hate bananas. He's like, never refuse anything, Kim. I'm part of the NRA club. And I was like, oh my God, that is amazing. And I have learned to practice that since then. The other person who taught me how to receive is a woman named Doyle. She has a couple of books, and one of them is, God, it just went right out of my head. Okay, I'll name another. Doyle, she has 3 or 4 books. One of them is Surrendered Single. One of them is Surrendered Wife. But the one I wanted to talk about, is that I don't know if it's going to come up, but the other one is it be careful what you wish for? I don't know. Look up Loye Doyle, look up those 2 books. And it's not those 2 books, but those 2 books are great if you're single or woman or you're a married woman. But the heart of her messaging is that the reason It's like a superwoman book about like a superwoman's guide to whatever. What she talks about is that it's really hard for women to receive. And the reason being is that because of the culture and us being in the workplace, we have to be kind of the person in charge to get things done. And when we change into our intimate relationships, personal relationships, ultimately we have to come from a place of learning how to receive and not necessarily be the driver of whatever is happening. And that can be really hard because to receive for men and women requires us to be vulnerable. And most of us don't like to be vulnerable because we can get hurt if we're vulnerable, and nobody wants to get hurt. So they just shut off the vulnerability. But we know that if you cut off vulnerability, you cut off joy, you cut off all the other great things that Brene Brown talked about in her talk. You can't cut off one without cutting off the other.
Yeah. That's, I think the really hard work is to stay open to everything, because I think we have this tendency to like shelter ourselves from
sure.
Feelings, because I don't think we were taught how to experience emotions, unless you had a really healthy relationship with emotional awareness in your family and at home. I think that we are taught by society, especially in like formative, like adolescent years, is to, I can only speak from my experience, but like as a man, especially, is like the be tough, nothing affects us. That's like part of that rugged individualism we have as Americans. Totally. That is, be tough, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, nothing can phase you. And to some degree, you have to have that like in the world. But I think it can be really unhealthy, and that turns into toxic masculinity, which is a whole host of other issues. And then you never truly experience joy. You never truly experience gratitude. You never are able to receive or give in a healthy way.
Agreed. And that's topic 2 we probably should talk about, is the concept of toxic masculinity and, where that comes from. And that's, addressed really powerfully in that book, The Mask You Live In. It's a documentary, not a book, because it shows that kind of toxic masculinity is coming out of not letting young boys and men feel their feelings, feel the hard to be with feelings. Men, in a way, culturally are expected to always be up. And even in that film, a lot of the younger boys that are like 12, 13 years old, they talk about like when you're up, when everything's going great, you got your bros. But as soon as things start to hit the fan and things are not so great, you're on your own. Nobody wants to talk to you. Nobody wants to hang out with you. Nobody wants to hear about it. So that is kind of the opposite of what we were saying about joy, right? But because I think it's scary to be with the sadness, it's scary to be with the anger, and boys especially are not encouraged to have it. So when one of their brothers or friends has it, they don't know what to do with it because they don't know how to deal with it for themselves. But that's the heart, the heart of receiving. You can't receive if you feel you potentially are going to be emasculated for receiving. And if you're a woman, you don't receive well, possibly because you feel that will make you look weak in the work setting. So it's, a lot of times being in that place of learning how to let things in, be it just I remember just, a guy offering me his seat on the train or on the bus, and before I was exposed to Lord Doyle's work, I would not accept it all the time, especially if it felt like, oh, well, then the guy's going to hit on me and then I'm going to have to say yes to him for the date, blah, blah, blah. But what I learned through Lord Doyle's work is like, you can receive that seat on the bus, and you can receive somebody complimenting you, which happens in New York City a lot, usually unasked for. Like you can receive that compliment, quote unquote. I mean, they're not always compliments, right? They're kind of double entendres sometimes. But the point is like, you can take that in without necessarily giving over your power. Like the guy can give me the seat on the bus and I don't have to say yes to him if he asks me out on a date. I could say no, thank you, but I appreciate the seat, and that's part of what I think I had to learn when I got fortunate enough to see her books. And I did a workshop with her. The first workshop I did with Laura Doyle was actually at Mama Gina, another teacher of mine, they're both, they both teach kind of similar things, but different. They both have kind of different approaches and perspectives on the world, for women especially. I would say Mama Gina and Laura Doyle are probably women authors, if you will. But the heart of the matter is I was in this workshop doing this receiving. It was a compliment. I was with somebody who's giving me a genuine compliment, somebody that knew me, all women at this event. And I couldn't keep my eyes open to receive her compliment. So the key was we had to keep our eyes open. We had to not say anything for like 10 seconds, have the person give us the compliment, not say anything for 10 seconds, keep looking them in the eye. And then we had to say, thank you, it's true.
Ooh, yeah, that's so.
Woo, that was hard.
So this sounds like an exercise that everyone should do because, it's so difficult. I remember having so much trouble receiving compliments, especially like in my early 20s. Somebody would say something to me and I felt like I had to just immediately compliment them back.
Yep.
And I think that's part of that like self-imposed pressure to reciprocate. Kind of like you're saying, like if somebody offers you a seat on the bus, then I have to like say yes to them. Or if they buy you a drink at a bar, you have to, talk to them.
Go dance or whatever.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's not the case though.
Exactly.
I think we've built that into society and then we take it on.
Yeah.
And we don't have to. That's not our
it's not our responsibility. It's not our responsibility, but it's tied up in that false sense of responsibility. And that's also because that concept of codependency, that we're responsible for each other's feelings, and I definitely learned that in my family of origin. Was I thought I was responsible for making sure my mother was happy and she was okay. And, so now it's like that false responsibility that I'm responsible for these other people. I mean, it was so part of my DNA until it wasn't. And now, when I talk to people and they're worried about their daughter, their mother-in-law, their sister, their cousin, their blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, it's none of your business. And they're just like, you're so cold. You're so heartless.
How can you say that?
How can you say that? And I'm like, actually, I know what it's like on the other side. And I'm telling you, it's none of your business. Yeah. And that is just like paradigm shifting for people when they can step into it. It is for me. I can't believe that I was able to ever find myself on the other side of this. But thank God I did, because I'll tell you, it's a hell of a lot less exhausting to be on this side than it was on that side. You're holding yourself, you're holding a whole bunch of weight that's not even yours to pick up. It's like, you got enough for your own life to carry.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't need
to carry everybody else around.
You sure do. You sure don't.
That's also another issue that I think we could talk about in a different episode, but about like the hero complex that a lot of us have around our families, our friends, society as a whole. Like
totally. And let's be clear that the hero complex is very different than the hero's journey, which you guys hear me talk about a lot. They are radically different. One
Those is are opposite ends of the spectrum.
Exactly. They are not the same, I promise you. All right. I was looking up Laura Doyle's book here because it's just one of my all-time favorite books. Where the heck is it? Oh, Things Will Get as Good as You Can Stand. That's the main title. The subtitle is When You Learn That It Is Better to Receive Than to Give.
Wow.
That book rocked my freaking world and completely threw me into what? Like, I was so completely shell-shocked by that book. And it changed my life. Totally changed my life. So if you are a listener, I believe, honestly, whether you're it is a superwoman's practical guide to getting everything she gives. I guess it's probably mostly for women. There was a part of me that wanted to say to guys, you guys could read it too. You could read it too. I mean, what the hell? But the point is, the lessons in there, I think, might be a little different for men. But that book, if you could just think about that for yourself, like men and women listening to this, consider, are you good at receiving? From compliments to opportunities, to money, to like, just see if you have resistance to receiving, get curious about it. Ask yourself what that's about without judging yourself, without making yourself wrong. Just ask yourself, would you potentially have a different experience if you let yourself receive and allow yourself to receive in the small ways, like the compliment from a stranger? I'm not talking about being harassed on the streets, which can happen in big cities to women and to men for that matter. But the point is, just see if there's ways that you are currently keeping yourself cut off from receiving. Notice the vulnerability you feel, which is understandable, but see if you can just do some work around letting a little bit more of it in, because it is going to nourish you. And we all need that nourishment wherever we can get it.
Yeah. I think this is probably an issue sometimes for traders around receiving money. Agreed. Where I think this happened. I mean, it's hard to tell sometimes early on when you're getting going, but like if you're the reason you're entering trades and it's like you're trading emotionally, and whether you're doing it because for whatever reason, but sometimes I think it comes after like winning for a while and you're like getting some momentum, and then you do something that's completely out of your strategy that just will kind of, it can blow things up to a certain extent.
Or you don't manage risk, or you're not managing your risk because you're so like, for sure.
And I think that was something that I dealt with early on with investing in trading when I didn't totally know what I was doing with trading. But I had made it quite a bit. And then I remember it was Helios and Matheson, which were like the movie pass guys. Anyway, I took a huge loss on that because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't do the research. And then I just like, took a huge loss because I just was not doing the strategies that I had used and had worked for years for me. And then I was like, all of a sudden just like, what happened? And I think that was also at a time where I recognized I was not great at receiving things. And so I think it was some sort of like, I mean, it's all anecdotal in myself, but that's my story. And I think I was trying to like level out somehow back to where
I think so. I think that is what's unconsciously happening for a lot of people, especially traders that, let's say, have great success early on, and then maybe they don't have it consistent. That consistency eludes them later. That's what I talk about, the temperature set, that some of us have a temperature gauge set for money and how much is acceptable, how much is enough, how much is too much. That's part of why I'm such an advocate for doing some relationship work on what the relationship is you have to money, so you can find out if it feels like, oh, that's just too much money. Well, then get curious about that, because if you ever got the opportunity to have that much money, you might start finding ways to sabotage that coming in. And if you feel you're not worthy of receiving, then you're going to sabotage your own trading account unconsciously, because you will feel like you don't have a right to receive. So I'm like, God, people, do the work around like, are you feeling that way? Because it's going to sabotage everything around you. For sure.
This reminds me of the conversation that you had with on the Confessions of a Market Maker podcast, like right at the beginning, with when Ray starts talking. He's like, this is Kim. We work together. I feel like we never talk about trading, but my trading has improved so much.
Totally. I mean, Ray, he's so amazing, because I think he really gets, and he's probably gotten this even when he was playing poker. I think he's known that his state of mind, his state of his own internal was going to impact his ability to play poker well or his trading. And so I think that the fact that we never talked about his trading is remarkable. And I'm not surprised that it doesn't even need to be talked about in a lot of conversations that I have with traders, because that isn't the issue. It's the issues underneath the choices in trading that are not trading specific, but related to their own relationship to themselves, and or to loss, and or to value and worthiness, and or to abundance. Like all of these are the things that inform a trader's the way they're showing up. And that's why I'm like to the traders of the world, the ones who say to me like, I have to make this work, Kim. I have to succeed in this. I got 3 months money in the bank and that's all I got. And I've quit my day job, or I want to quit my day job. And I'm just like, oh my God, how have you done therapy for 15 years? Have you had a coach for 20? Like, if you haven't done any personal development or self-reflection on any level, you do not want to get your lessons. Like, coaching might be expensive, but it ain't as expensive as the market is going to make you pay. So I'm like, do the due diligence. Do you react to people that don't agree with you, or do you respond? Like, do people in your household think you're a hothead, or do they think you're somebody who never speaks up for yourself? Like, all of those pieces are going to impact the success you have as a trader or not. And if you don't have that awareness and you're still kind of reacting in your day-to-day life, well, what do you think is going to happen when you start trading with money?
Yeah.
The most stimulating, more than sex, more than anything is money. You are not going to probably have the outcome you want if you haven't done some of this work.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should close it there. We should
probably close it there. Be grateful. I'm grateful for this conversation. That was awesome. Thanksgiving is, I wrote you and told you this, but Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday.
This is my card from this wonderful human being. I have a very nice thank you card from you saying thank you.
Just want to say Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday because it forces everyone. Well, I guess it doesn't force them, but it, for the most part, puts everybody. And I think it was something that shifted in me early on in my life. It made me be grateful on one day of the year, and it was like, I really like that. And it's all about food. There's no pressure of of the giving of or receiving. If you're uncomfortable with that,
you're right.
It's just appreciating your family, appreciating the food.
Yeah.
Be open to the conversations that you might get to have.
Yeah, totally. Especially the ones you don't agree with. Try to be as open as you can and receive that person's perspective and give them the benefit of the doubt that they may have, reasons for that perspective, even if you can't even imagine what they are. Like, there is a reason, I promise you. Everybody has a perspective because of their experiences, good or bad, and it's formed them. So try to have patience with those older generations that maybe don't see it the way you do if you're a younger generation. So thank you guys for listening and for watching. We have hopefully given you some tools or some kind of things to think about, which is, of course, what I hope for. And please, if you're willing to give us some comments in the comments box about the topics you want to see me address or hear us talk about, please do let us know. And if you like it, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple. That always helps. And hopefully we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you, Lucas, today, and have a happy Thanksgiving.
You too. Happy Thanksgiving, Kim.
Thank you.
This has been the Wall Street Coach Podcast with Kim Ann Curtin. You can find out more about her and her team online at thewallstreetcoach.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. Thank you for listening.